Thank you so much for this incredible collaboration. Really, without the support of Queer Circle, this would not be possible, and I hope that it's the beginning of many. But I also am reminded of how far back we go, and I'm being reminded of the first stages of Queer Circle where you invited me to a meeting when, of course, Queer Circle was still in its first years but doing important work, but you were in the beginning of thinking about getting a permanent space for Queer Circle. And I remember in that meeting, there were quite a few of us, and we were all working within, intersecting fields in London. And you were very open to just really share what you were thinking with us and open to feedback, and really it created a sense of true collaboration in the room and working towards something that we didn't know what it would be. And I remember also that Bonestone Jones was in that meeting, and that's where I met them, thanks to you bringing us together. And we've done many collaborations throughout the years, one of them being their amazing performance yesterday. Adham Faramawi was in that meeting, who I knew, and Adham Faramawi is performing at the end of today. So really, I want to start by saying thank you for that openness, and can you tell us more about what Queer Circle was back then and how it has evolved throughout the years?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that intro. And I just want to start by saying thank you to you for bringing this all together. I know it's been a labor of love, and your commitment has just been so inspiring to be a part of. So thank you to Costas. Yeah, Queer Circle kind of started as a community response, really, to the lack of LGBTQ plus spaces. For those of you that don't know, we've lost over 60% in the last decade in the capital, and it's something that's being replicated across the UK. So that was the first port of call, really. We threw a 5-day event that was very DIY. There wasn't much structure to it. It was like, if artists want to hang work, they can hang work. If they want to do a screening, we'll do a screening. And it just seemed to really resonate with people. And so it was clear that Queer Circle should exist, even if we didn't know what that should be at that stage. So we held a series of meetings, like you said, for about a year. I like to call them think-ins, which was something that was used by the women's liberation in the 60s and then adopted by the gay liberation in the 70s, where intimate, small groups of people came together and shared their experiences as women or as gay people for the first time. And so we did that as queer people and as queer practitioners. So we brought together community organizers, artists, curators, writers, and wherever possible, tried to bring people together that didn't know each other, like you and Bones, so that we could have these open dialogues where we could learn from one another, where we could spark something in one another. One of the really fascinating things that came out of those conversations was artists being led on this journey to realize that actually they do deserve more. It's not a case of just needing. We do actually deserve these spaces and these programs and this support. And I remember when we was doing those meetings, I said to you, I was like, oh, we'll get there with Queer Circle. And you said to me, well, Queer Circle already exists. It's already existing. This is Queer Circle. And I think it made me realize that, Queer Circle isn't a fixed body. It is a process in and of itself. And so that's something we've tried to adopt now that will continue now that we've taken on a permanent space.
What are the lessons that you have learned throughout the year, throughout all these years, from that moment until opening the doors a month ago to a permanent home?
I think it's about, what we've been trying to do over the last year, and we're still doing now that we're in the space, is just plant seeds and allowing things time and space to grow and converge and come apart, meeting with a variety of people, whether it be community organizers or artists, and really just listening to what they're doing at the moment or what they're planning to doing to see where things can come together and converge, realizing that none of our programs are fixed. we kind of have these kind of starting points of arts and culture or health and well-being or learning, and realizing that they're not, they're not separate, and actually these things do converge at times. It's really just a process of listening.
I think that's very important, and I really want to hear more, and for the people that don't know about it, about your program for the next year. I know that you have dedicated it in many ways to ecology, and I know that we're not talking just about, artists who work with the environmental. You are thinking and working through an ecological way of being and relating to each other, as you just described. So I was wondering if you could tell us what Queer Circle is looking to in the next year, and I really want to hear about the Catalyst program as well that you just announced.
Yeah, so one of the responses through those meetings was that LGBTQ plus artists were often only curated if they were dealing with their marginalized identity. And what we wanted to do at Queer Circle was say, actually, as queer people, we do think and do other things other than just be queer. So we decided to choose a kind of a broad annual theme, so that the artists that we curated under that were responding to that theme. And if the artists decide to choose to talk about their marginalized identity, that was up to them. If it was relevant to their work, great. But it wasn't a prerequisite for being selected or chosen or curated. So that was one thing. And obviously, as you said, we've been in the development of Queer Circle, we've been using ecological thinking, so it made sense to use that as the kind of public program for the first year. Particularly thinking of the ways in which mycelium work, continually building these networks, and then how is energy transmitted through mycelium, and it kind of moving, throughout the ground at all times, but then redirecting energy as and when it's needed to a particular point, and then, flowering as a mushroom or something like that. So we've been using that kind of thinking, and as I just said, meeting with artists or community organizers or campaigners and seeing where the connections are, and just kind of, just waiting for when it's time for that thing to flower, I guess. And we've structured the program so that there are 3 seasons each year. Each will have an exhibition commission. And each of the artists are dealing with the broad topic of ecology in very different ways. We've opened with Michaela Yearwood-Dan, who's predominantly a painter and a ceramicist, who has created this environment in which we can sit in and contemplate and rest. Michaela's work is predominantly thinking about love, particularly as a queer woman of color. And so at this early stage to start, we wanted to create an environment that celebrated us as queer people, reflected on our interconnectedness as humans, but also with the natural world. I wanted to create an environment that is celebratory, because as we know, there are a lot of challenges ahead of us, politically, environmentally, socially, and we will get to those things, but we wanted to do that first and foremost from a place of love. And then our next exhibition is with Bonestown Jones, who had that electrifying performance last night. And it's a very different show, where our space is situated. They're planning on building a new tunnel underneath us, a car tunnel that will go into Newham, which is the most polluted borough in the country, where children's lung capacity is much smaller than elsewhere in the city. They're also planning to build a car tunnel underneath Stonehenge. So Bones did a pilgrimage from our space down to Stonehenge. We connected kind of urban and rural campaigners around the same topic, so that we can talk about the importance of ancient ley lines, the vibration of the earth, the health of the earth, and the health implications for us as humans. And I think that's where you'll start to see this kind of social action element of Queer Circle, where we're linking up artists with campaigners to have these much broader conversations. And then with Rafael Perez Evans, we're talking about queerness in rural lands and agriculture. So it's very broad, but they allow us to have these very big conversations, niche conversations in a much broader, bigger topic.
I think that's really important, and I really want to go back to hearing more about the Catalyst program, because I think that some people in the audience might benefit from listening to you speaking about it.
When we was developing the program, it was about ensuring there was something that kind of drove Queer Circle forward, but also allowing enough space for the community and artists to contribute and shape what that program was. So we know that space is sparse in the capital. So for a month in between each season, we hand over the space to another LGBT organization so that they can program what they want. It's just paying it forward, essentially. We also allow people to book out our spaces throughout our project space throughout the year so that they can develop and deliver their own projects. But a Catalyst program is that opportunity to have a public-facing exhibition or event or workshop that also diversifies what our queer thinking, right? We don't want to have this top-down approach where Queer Circle is dictating what queerness is. And so constantly bringing in other voices to shape that is really important.
And giving space.
Yeah, physical space, yeah.
So I just want to open up to the audience in case there are any questions.
I'd just like to touch on something that Macarena was saying yesterday about, we often think about the environment as this global issue, and actually it's affecting local communities in very different ways at the same time. So our physical program is very much focused on UK-based artists at the moment, whilst we build that sense of community and that sense of place. But our digital program is an opportunity for us to work with LGBTQ+ artists around the world. So we run an Artist in Conversation series where we commission a different artist around the world each month to hold conversations with anyone that they like around that theme. So just thinking, it was such a joy to meet Seba yesterday. What does it mean to commission someone like Seba to hold these conversations with local people, whether it's campaigners or other people in the community or local artists or scientists or whatever, on that very local level, to create this global cultural exchange of ideas and thinking.
I think that's really important. That's what we have been discussing also together, and myself with Macarena and Jack. It's that what we're doing and during this weekend is really important in terms of giving the space to those artists and practitioners and thinkers to share their ideas with audiences. But what is magical are the connections that are happening outside, smoking in the breaks, over dinner, from here onwards.
Yeah, it's very special for us to be sharing this space together, particularly in this particular climate. But the real work and the real magic will happen outside of this space. What happens when we leave this space, the intimate conversations in the corridor, or the fact that we're planting these seeds now for things to sprout elsewhere is, that's really important.
If you have a question, please raise your hand and a microphone will come to you. Otherwise, I have two more questions that I wanted to ask you. So you've been speaking about this throughout our conversation, but I really want to ask you specifically about some of the challenges that a queer space in London faces today. And a space like Queer Circle, and what does it need in order to survive?
I mean, unfortunately, we do live in a capitalist society, so that is one thing. We do need money. But really, I think the success of spaces like Queer Circle is about the active participation of the community, right? And actively listening to the needs and being agile enough to shapeshift, really, and adapting into those needs, to reflect those needs. If we become static, we become useless. So it's about remaining, to use again one of Macarena's terms, liquid. To be shape-shifting through in response to those needs is really important. One of the things that's come out since we've opened is this really need to focus in on health and well-being and that intersection of arts and culture and health and well-being. So actually does having a space in an urban environment actually make sense, right? Do we need to be thinking about spaces in rural or, rural spaces perhaps?
Great, and I think that it's really telling that we are in this building today, an old church and an old queer nightclub that has closed down. Then it became a pub. Then it was squatted. Then, of course, Stones took over and is bringing in incredible performances to audiences. But I think it really feels pertinent to me to address the welcome ghosts that are in this space, and also think about the incredible opportunity we have had with this weekend, our program and our collaboration to reclaim this space with Queer Earth and Look It Matters. And I think that the way that you are also open to Queer Circle being liquid and traveling across the country or online across the world is really pertinent, and I think that you should, of course, continue that. So I was just wanting to finish our conversation with asking you, what are your hopes for the future for Queer Circle?
I think it's difficult to pin down what the hopes are, because it's, we're maintaining that kind of open dialogue with the community. So what I hope for Queer Circle isn't necessarily what's needed or what the community wants. So we're not predicting too far in advance what Queer Circle will be, because we don't know what's going to be needed in 2, 5, 10 years. I think it's just about, sorry to keep saying the same thing, but it's just about remaining open and reflective and listening to what those needs are. And just to touch on the fact that this was, one of the most important queer venues in the 80s, 90s. I think it's important that we bring in that queer heritage and that queer history as part of these conversations around ecology. When we're talking about ancient ley lines and sacred spaces with Bones Tan Jones, we're also programming archive exhibitions about shebeens and Systematic, which were sacred spaces for particularly queer women of colour in South London when there weren't other spaces. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for our collaboration, and thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Aspen.